they hadn't planned to celebrate New Year together. In fact, both of them had separate ideas for the night, separate invitations, separate expectations. She was supposed to go to a loud party with friends, the kind with music too loud to talk and drinks poured without counting. He planned to stay home, convinced that New Year's Eve was overrated and that another year changing numbers didn't deserve that much effort. Somewhere during the afternoon, plans started to fall apart. Her friends canceled one by one, and his quiet evening suddenly felt too empty. One short message turned into a phone call, and without much discussion, they decided to spend the night together, calling it a temporary solution, nothing serious. The evening started awkwardly. They didn't have a clear plan, no big dinner prepared, no playlist chosen. They stood in the kitchen, opening random cabinets, laughing at how unprepared they were. Dinner became a mix of whatever they found. Simple food, mismatched plates, wine poured into glasses that didn't match either. It wasn't festive in the traditional sense, but it felt honest. They talked about the year that was ending, not listing achievements, but sharing moments that had shaped them quietly. Mistakes, unexpected turns, things that didn't work out the way they hoped. There was relief in saying these things out loud without pretending the year had been perfect. As midnight approached, the city outside grew louder. Fireworks started early, people shouted from balconies, cars honked in celebration. They sat on the floor by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the lights explode in the sky. When the countdown finally began, they counted together, laughing when they lost track of numbers. At midnight, there was no dramatic kiss, no big speech. Just a quiet moment, foreheads touching, sharing the simple realization that this felt right in a way they hadn't expected. Later, as the noise faded and the city settled into the new year, they stayed awake, talking about what came next. Not resolutions, not promises, just hopes. More honesty. Less rushing. Choosing people who felt like home. They admitted they hadn't planned this night, hadn't imagined it would matter. But sometimes, the best New Year's beginnings aren't the ones you prepare for weeks in advance. Sometimes they happen when plans fall apart, when expectations disappear, and when two people choose to be present instead of impressive. And as the first hours of the new year passed quietly around them, they understood that this unplanned night would stay with them far longer than any party ever could. The morning after arrived slowly, almost carefully, as if it didn't want to disturb what had been built overnight. Pale winter light filled the room, revealing empty glasses on the table and a blanket still tangled on the floor. She woke first and stayed still for a moment, listening to his breathing, realizing how calm she felt. There was no pressure to define anything, no rush to explain what the night meant. It simply existed, warm and real. When he opened his eyes, they smiled at each other in that quiet way people do when words feel unnecessary, and somehow that felt more intimate than any declaration. They made breakfast together without talking much at first. Coffee brewed, toast burned slightly, and neither of them cared. Eventually, conversation returned, softer and more thoughtful than the night before. They spoke about how strange it was that something unplanned could feel so grounding, how rare it was to let a moment be enough without immediately turning it into a question about the future. He admitted that he usually avoided expectations because he was afraid of disappointment. She said she often filled silence with plans because stillness scared her. Saying these things out loud didn't make them heavier, it made them easier to carry. As the day unfolded, they went for a walk through the quiet streets. The city looked tired but peaceful, traces of celebration still visible everywhere. They talked about ordinary things, work, small goals, places they wanted to visit someday, and the conversation flowed without effort. There was no promise of what they would become, only an understanding that whatever happened next would come from honesty, not habit or convenience. That felt new. That felt right. By the time they parted ways later that evening, neither of them felt the need to rush the goodbye. They hugged, longer than usual, not because they were afraid to let go, but because they wanted to remember how this felt. That new year didn't begin with fireworks or big decisions. It began quietly, with two people allowing a moment to matter without trying to control it. And long after the decorations were taken down and life returned to normal speed, they both knew that this was the kind of beginning that didn't fade easily, the kind that grows slowly, naturally, and stays because it was never forced in the first place.